Hello everybody, my name is Askaroff. I was born in the sewing industry. I've spent my whole life repairing and fixing and maintaining machines. About 30 years ago I was inducted into the Guild of Master Craftsmen, and I have serviced tens of thousands of machines, from tiny little ones to ones where there was one room with one machine costing over £1 million with an operator in another room. So today we are going to show you how to service the fabulous Singer Featherweight. Come on. Singer Featherweight, the 221 and the 222. The 222 was a K, it was only made in Kilbowie in Clydebank and Scotland, is one of the finest sewing machines on planet Earth. It is astonishing. It took years to design, years to tool up and years to perfect. And when you sew with a Singer Featherweight, you are sewing with the ultimate quality. It is just stunning. So now today I'm going to show you, there's the 222. Why not? Because it's the queen of all singers. The only difference with the 222 is there's a little thumb nut there and you can slide off the free arm. So we're just going to move that out the way and we're going to show you the actual servicing. Surprisingly, you need very little to service the 222. You need some oil. Okay, now as I've said many times before, I use a little bit of clear piping that I get from the old spray cans, and I stuff it in the end of my oil can so I can see a single drop of oil. Now when we're oiling a machine, you just want that drop of oil, you don't want anything else. So now you can use all sorts of different oils. I've got gun oil, I've got high quality sewing machine oil, but basically pop down to your local sewing machine shop or go online and get your oil, and that's that out of the way. You need screwdrivers. Now there's no real brain surgery with screwdrivers, just make sure you get a screwdriver that fits the screw head. Don't get one too small or too big, you'll just scratch the heads and that just looks awful. I tend to use a long handled screwdriver so then I can get right down into the actual heads very easily. Now the first thing we do when we're servicing a featherweight is we're going to loosen off the motor. So we're going to loosen that off. And the reason we're going to do that is we want the motor to have a little bit of a spin. So we loosen the screw there, we lift the motor up so the belt's nice and loose now. And then what we're going to do is, excuse me a second, we're going to plug it in and give the motor a run. Now the reason we want the motor to run is the happiest a motor ever is under no load at full speed, and it just clears it out. It saves, if you've got a good motor and you're servicing your machine regularly, supposing you use your machine regularly, you're going to service it twice a year, and giving that motor a good high spin is going to be so happy. So first thing we do, foot flat down, high speed, and we're just letting the motor really spin, and you can hear it speeding up. You can hear it's actually happy to do this. Then once we've run that for about 20 seconds, we just drop that down again till it's just turning the motor, turning the whole machine. You do not want this too tight. If you over tighten your motor belt, you really strain the machine and the motor. So you drop it down a little bit till it just turns. If it's turning and it's turning the whole machine, that's plenty. You can always retighten it. That's the first one. Now on the featherweights, let me unplug that's out of the way. On the featherweights there are loads of oil holes. Basically wherever you see an oil hole, a little hole, is going to be a drop of oil. So you're going to see them all over the machine. Even on the winder unit there's a tiny little oil hole, and the first thing we're going to do is just loosen off this cover, get that out the way, get my single drop of oil. Now when you're servicing a sewing machine, people go, oh well, I haven't used it. But what they don't realise is they're living in a centrally heated home, and everything is, the metal's gone dry and loose and dry and loose, and the oil has been squeezed out of the bearings. Now you can put a little bit of grease. These are all steel gears on this machine, there's no plastic, you don't have to worry about that. So you can put a little bit of basic LM grease on the gears if you like. If they've got grease on them, you can just smooth it around a bit. And so that's the first part. The winder has a little oil hole in there, and the winder is a friction fit. So that little screw there just makes it just tight enough to push down quite heavily onto the hand wheel. And so now let's turn the machine round. We have the motor grease points, and this is quite a hot subject. There's 2 grease points on the motor. Now in all my years of servicing sewing machine motors, and particularly the ones with grease points, I very rarely need to have to grease them. The idea is, as the motor gets hot, the grease melts a tiny little bit and lubricates the phosphor bronze bearings. It wasn't a great idea. You don't really want grease near your motor all through the electrics. So there is no modern machines that it has it on, which says enough. So you can grease your motor, but really genuinely, unless you have to, don't. Now on the back of the machine, this is the main shaft going down the machine, and there are 2 oil holes there. And again, we put a drop of oil down each hole, and those 2 are really important, because if you don't oil those and that main shaft seizes, you're in trouble. So that's the back of the machine. Now let's turn it over and look underneath. Underneath on the 222 is slightly different. The 221 is all square, so you just undo the main nut, but on the 222 you have 2. So we're going to take that side off and open this up, and you will see the gears is exposed and the shafts, and you can see there's almost no muck on there. And let's take this one off here. Let's just undo that, and we'll see what's inside this old girl. I bought this beauty from a chap who bought the house on the racecourse just above Lewis, and it's just phenomenal machine. Now what I'm going to do here is, normally if you take the bottom off, it could be full of fluff, depends how much sewing. I will then get my little hoover nozzle, and I will get my cleaning brush, or a paintbrush really, and I will just go round, hoover all that up until that's nice and clean, and that's easy peasy, done in seconds with a good quality hoover. And then we're going to get the oil bottle again, and we're going to look once again for the oil holes. So you see there's an oil hole there, that's a really important one, and there's an oil hole down there. You can put an oil hole there, and you can put a drop of oil on the end of these shafts, and these shafts like to pivot, and they're all adjustable, but a drop of oil on those. And then again, you've got the corkscrew hardened steel gears in there. You can smear a little bit of grease on there. You can see there's a little bit of grease on there already, and that's that side done. So now look, you can just see a little bit of fluff everywhere. Just get rid of all that and then put that together. Servicing these machines are fun, you know, it's great fun, isn't it? And we've already done all the way there. So now we're going to do, we've got to here, we've got a little drop of oil down there, that's the top shaft oil, a little drop of oil in the needle bar, and did we put one in there? I can't remember. You can always put another one in there. And so now we are up to this side. So we're going to take this side off, which is again just a little thumb nut, and that side's going to open up. And if it's all mucky in there, oh, that's spotless, we're going to just suck it out with the vacuum cleaner. If not, we're just going to turn the machine, and a little bit of oil, a drop of oil on every little moving part. Now this is where you just want to be so careful with your oil. Another little place to oil is just in between the presser foot. There's a long spring that runs down there, and if that gets dry and that locks up, that's the pressure on your work. And a nice feed is as much to do with that spring in there as it is to do with the teeth underneath. So make sure you everything, little spot in there, a little drop of oil, and that we don't need to hoover that out. We can put that straight back on, and again that just clips back on there. This styrated plate style was on the later post-war Singer Featherweights and a lot of the other Singer machines, and it represents that period, doesn't it? Beautiful. Now let's take the foot off, the needle out. We're going to talk about the needle in a minute when we get it back to sewing. Take the foot off here. All this was designed by geniuses, as far as I'm concerned, to come apart incredibly easily. Now on the 221 you just have 2 screws. On the 222 you've got a 3rd screw at the back here, and this is where you can see how I love my long handle screwdriver. You can get down into the screws so easily, and you've got both hands on it, and I always magnetize my screwdrivers, so you know, pick the screws up. And here we are. Now we're going to take this plate off. Now this side of the plate is identical to the 221, how it works. And when we take it off, it doesn't matter how we take it off, but when we put it back on, it is really important. I tend to push my finger underneath the plate there, so I don't have to scratch anything and lift. Oh, that's immaculate. That lifted off. Now when we put it back on, there's a whole different thing. Now again, what I would do is I would get my vacuum cleaner and suck out every little bit. Now this is when I get my torch out and my tweezers. If there's any little bits of fluff, I will just spend 20 minutes just unpicking any bits of fluff, and quite often little rolls of thread. You get little bits of thread wrapped around the back of the hook, and you can just pick those out bit by bit until they're all gone. You don't want any bits of thread flying around. Now let's get me oil. It's quite important on this model to get a little drop. Again, you want the perfect feed, so just a drop of oil, just a drop of oil. And if you're not sure, just move it, and if you can see two bearings moving together, just put a little drop of oil on. Now if you can just move around the front, if you can just see this locating arm, now that is what holds the featherweight hook in the correct position. And when you put the needle plate back on, that must be upright, and that locates into these little fingers there. Do you see these little shoulders there? So when that plate goes back on for both the 221 and the 222, it must be located exactly right. So you see it there? And make sure there's a little bit of play in there as well, because the thread has to go round from the top, round and back up there. So if there's no play there, if someone's over tightened those screws, it won't stitch properly. The plate's back on and we're nearly done. And I didn't show you about dropping the oil underneath there, because the oil to the main shaft here can, on a 222, can go through that little hole there. So you can put a little drop of oil there. So I wanted to show you that. Now let's look at the hook again. This is just so important. I'm just going to take the bobbin case out, so watch that. Again, we give that a good old brush. I use a slightly smaller, stiffer brush for going all around there, and you want that all spotless. The most important point, or one of the most important points on your featherweight, is where the inner and outer race join. And so the inner race is held by the finger and the outer race spins around it, and the hook, you just see the hook there, that comes around and picks the stitch up, and that flies at 800 stitches per minute. So you can see how that's going, and we just turn it and we just put one drop of oil on there. That's all you want, and we need to get rid of most of that in a second. And can you see these? I'll just point to it. Can you see those little there to cut the thread if ever it gets jammed in there? Because one single piece of thread in there and the whole hook can jam, and that's what that little screw's there for. You can undo it, drop the main outer hook down and get the thread out, because sometimes the featherweights do jam. Do not over oil that point. So now what we can do is put the old girl back together. I don't know if I mentioned this one was made in 1955, and so it was made a couple of years before I was even born. And what we're going to do now is wind the bobbin. So we're particularly using white thread. Normally I love the Gutermann. Always make sure you've got a little felt on there. It stops the spindle from spinning too much. And basically just wrap it around there a few times just to lock it on there, push it on there, put that down there, back round there, it comes back in a triangle like that. Release the machine. Oh, plugging in would help. We'll actually get some power, and then wind the bobbin. Now when I wind the bobbin, I always keep my finger very gently on the reel of thread while I'm winding, so that doesn't fly across the room, and I get a slightly better tension on the bobbin case. Wind on as much as you want, and then we're ready, re-engage it. We are ready to put it into the bobbin case. Now when I put my bobbin into the bobbin case, there's obviously two ways, and I always prefer it anti-clockwise. I find I get slightly better tension, and I go round underneath the spring, click, just underneath there, and it will always, when the tension's set about right, on a full bobbin, it will always just about hold its own weight and just drop a little bit. I do quite a lot of, on some of my books on Amazon, I've done about the fault finding and the tension adjustment. Now we're going to drop that into the machine, and we're going to put the needle in. I always give it a second tap when I've got it in to make sure. Nothing more annoying than it flying out when you start to sew. Needles, let's get that out of the way. The needles, the needle on this machine, flat side, outside. Absolutely essential that you have the flat side outside. There's very few machines that have that, and so that push it all the way up to the top. My favourite machine needle for this is a Schmetz. I love Schmetz needles, size 1490. Always when you're threading the machine, lift the foot because it releases the automatic tension release, and round there, click, or make sure you listen to the click. I just go quiet, so important, that click. Finger on the reel of thread and up. There we go. That click means it's right in between the two plates in there. And then thread it up, catch the take up lever, and all this is very straightforward. Catch the guides on the side of the machine. Oh, incidentally, that little hole there, that oblong hole there, is for putting the darning plate on there, which is an optional extra on this machine. And then thread the needle up straight through the eye of the needle from your right to your left. Absolutely essential. Turn the hand wheel always towards you, anti-clockwise. Pick the stitch up. Here it comes, pick the stitch up. Now what I do now is, because we've serviced the machine, is we get rid of the oil. So what we're going to do is get a bit of kitchen roll and just fold it up 2 or 3 or 4 times, it doesn't matter, get it under the machine. This is why I'm using white thread, because we need to get rid of every drop of oil, and we're just going to give it a run. I'm setting it to 8 stitches per inch, which incidentally is the British standards stitches per inch is what they recommend. But if you want it bigger, if you want a bigger stitch, unscrew that and smaller. Oh, while we're here, you can see what this is. This is the only other extra on the 222 that drops the teeth down for darning when you put the little darning hoop on, and then you click it back up for normal sewing. So I'm going to lock that into 8 stitches per inch so we can go up into reverse and it will stop there, and we're going to give it a run. And now we're going to run it until the thread is clean. And that's when you look at the thread and look at the thread, and this is why we use the white thread. If you use any other colour, you can't see properly, and the kitchen roll will just take any oil away that's hanging around, that's flapping around. And then when we've finished, drop the needle down and give it a little wipe around there, and then get that out of the way. And now we can check our tensions. So I always get a normal piece of cotton fabric, just average. What we're looking for is average tension for average fabric. And so a normal piece of average fabric. Set the dial around between the 4 and 5, around the middle of the dial. When it's happy, that's where it's going to be. Set that to 8 and we are ready to go. And then we will examine that stitch. And if it's not perfect, let's just have a look underneath. We'll just turn that over. You can't see it very well because that's white. Look at that. That is the most spectacular stitch. No new machine today will give you a perfect straight quilting stitch like that. That's a dream, isn't it? That's what makes these machines so perfect. So between the 4 and 5, that's where that's happy. So now that's it. We've serviced the whole machine. It's running beautifully, and that will make some, fantastic work. And I really hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've seen how easy it is and how much fun it is. And thank you for watching. Bye for now.